Thank you for being here. I have to say that I feel a little bit funny here. I feel like a lifeguard on the beach, like looking over this elevated seat. But anyway, thank you for inviting me. We have a super panel here. I've rarely seen such a high-level group of university people all together in one place. And we have a super issue, super topic, how to promote innovation in the Americas and how to use our university systems to promote innovation. A brief introduction. Many of the panels in this conference talk about how great we're doing, about the future of Latin America in innovation, about how we are the wave of the future. But in reality, as I'm sure all the participants in this panel know very well, we are not doing that well. If you look at patents, for instance, patent registrations for new inventions, Latin America is way, way, way back. Last year at the International Intellectual Property Organization in Geneva, the US registered 56,000 patents, Japan about 45,000, South Korea 18,000, and Latin America, all 33 Latin American and Caribbean countries together, about 1,000. In other words, all 33 Latin American and Caribbean countries together don't register even 10% or 50% of the patents that one Asian country, South Korea, does every year. And when it comes to universities and when it comes to research and development, it's pretty much the same. In Latin America, we invest about 0.6% of our GDP's average in research and development. In the developed world, it's about 2%. In countries like South Korea and Israel, it's about 4.5%. So here's the question to all of you. What can Latin American and Caribbean universities do to narrow that gap that separates us from the best performing countries, from the countries that have a culture of innovation, that invent new products, that register them, create patents, and make a lot of more money than we do in our countries? Who wants to take it? What can universities do in our region to promote innovation and a culture of patenting?
Just one thing.
I'm going to ask, since we don't have each tags with each other's names, please identify yourself.
Okay, I'm José Rodríguez from Universidad Andrés Bello de Chile. One thing, what can governments, countries do is to increase the investment in innovation. Look, you mentioned some rich countries, they invest 4% of GDP in research. In Chile, it's 0.34% of a small GDP. So that is a very few amount of money. If we don't change that, nothing will happen.
Yes.
Hello. My name is Guillermo Marshall. I'm the provost of Catholic University of Chile. I think one of the most important things that we have to do inside of the university, of course, the society is another aspect, but inside of the university is to change the process of promoting our professors. The system that right now is that they will be asked to write papers, but they see that this is a distraction, to do innovation, patents. It's a distraction of the main purpose that they want to be promoted to associate professor, full professor. So first thing is the university has to change the process of how they have to promote and include this as an outcome that is important. The second thing I think is important is to the university have programs for funding patents. And I think if professors see that in the same department, another faculty has many patents, it will get involved in this process. So it's a matter of also a change in the culture of the university. But one thing is important is that not all the professor will be, not all the students, not all the professor will be involved in this aspect of academic activity.
Yes.
I'm Henning Jenson, rector of the University of Costa Rica. I agree with common understanding that innovation is extremely important for economic growth, and that it is a key factor in developing the economy and industry and developing knowledge in general. But in Latin America, we have quite a paradox. On the one side, it is indeed a fact that our nations do not invest enough in science, development, and innovation. But on the other side, our universities play a major role in building our nations and our societies. Our societies cannot be imagined without the role that universities have played along history. So how to explain this paradox? One of the aspects I think we have to take into account is that there are different kinds of innovations. And we have one innovation that is mostly tied to the improvement of competitiveness, to improve the capacity to build new products. But we also have a kind of innovation that is maybe more inclusive. And this kind of innovation has to do with social aspects, with social commitment. And in Latin America, in many of our countries, we have been able to take the decisions in order to be socially, in a very relevant way, socially innovative. And I think you have to take this also into account. How can you be socially, politically also innovative? And I think our countries have a very, very important experience in this field. Take, for instance, public health in Costa Rica. Take, for instance, the development of democracy in Costa Rica. What we have also done in order to warrant the accomplishment of human rights. That is also very, very important. So you have to make a kind of difference between what you would conceptualize innovation in the field of industry, in the field of development of knowledge, and in the development of these also very important social aspects. Our universities, just to summarize, have been extremely relevant in cultural and social development.
Sure, go ahead.
Vivek Goel from the University of Toronto. I'll just add in, I think another really important role for universities in this space is engaging students and giving them the opportunity to be involved in the patent process and creation of the companies. At the University of Toronto, we found that 2/3 of our invention disclosures list a graduate student or postdoctoral fellow as a co-author of that discovery. And rather than just relying on the professors to commercialize it, because many of them want to continue to pursue their research, we've started to work with the students and the postdoctoral fellows and supporting them in taking the leadership in developing the commercial potential. So we have boot camps and entrepreneurship 101 courses. And then we provide them with the resources access to legal support and so on through the incubators to carry that forward. And just over the last 5 years, we find that as a very successful strategy.
Go ahead.
Hilary Beckles, president of the University of the West Indies. In addition to what has been said, I think there are two specific issues that could be identified. One, in developing countries, there is an inadequate alignment between industry and academia. This non-alignment between industry and academia does not sponsor and promote the migration of research out of universities into industries. And this is an issue that has to be addressed. I know most universities have in their strategic plan how best to align academia and industry to allow for the migration of research from the faculties into the factories, so to speak. The second aspect has been an inadequate legal framework that protects the intellectual property rights of academics. Unless the countries themselves legislate that framework and provide coverage for researchers, it is unlikely that researchers will move their tremendous amount of scholarship into the commercial space. So a legal framework is absolutely vital, and oftentimes governments do not understand the stimulating effect of a legal framework that allows for the movement of ideas into the commercial space for product development. And I have seen in many developing countries, these two specific constraints have suppressed the number of patents that are available in those countries.
Raul Rodriguez from Monterey Tech, I would fully agree with that. I think it goes without saying that in the absence of a great research university, no innovation ecosystem is possible. But how do you build a great research university? The experience so far suggests there's two or three elements that are fundamental. One is great leadership. You would not have University of Texas at Austin having had the effect in Austin as a great innovation ecosystem for the past 40 years if it hadn't been for Jos Kosmeski. And if it hadn't been for, number two, a great interface with the business community, IC Square. Or in the case of Chicago, for example, you have 1874 with a tremendous spillover effect in terms of the universities participating into startups. And the third component is precisely the element that has to do that we would summarize somehow as the technology transfer component of these great universities. Think, for example, of what Hebrew University is doing in Jerusalem. I met with the founder of Mobileye last year. He had just sold the greatest exit in Israel's history in terms of startups. He had sold Mobileye for $15.3 billion. He got a good chunk of that himself. And when you ask him, what are you going to be doing today, assuming that, it's going to be more startups, first thing he answers is, I'm going to have more time to devote to the university. That level of loyalty would be absolutely impossible in the absence of this technology transfer scheme that has been so effective there and in any other case of research universities that are spilling over into innovation in their communities.
Yes, go ahead.
I agree. Pablo Navas from Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá. I think Raul's point is very important because it's not a matter of a university but of a culture. I think that this name that is so used now of an ecosystem is certainly a very, very important point when you find that innovation is in the air. Certainly the presence of research universities are, I would say, very, very important, if not absolutely necessary. That's the case in Israel, certainly Silicon Valley, you go to the Boston area, Texas. But it's a matter of an ecosystem. And in our case at Los Andes, that's been very hard. Within the university, you can do things like what Guillermo suggested or stimulating our professors and students. But the overall ecosystem, it's very hard with legal implications, very little money, very adverse to risk, very few people wanting to take like angel investors, funds or anything like that. So I think, Andres, we're very, very lagging behind.
But here's the question. Let me play a little bit the devil's advocate. Aren't you guys passing the ball to other people all the time? In other words, you're blaming the governments for not investing enough, which is true. It's true that Latin American and Caribbean countries invest less in R&D than Israel or South Korea or even the developed countries. You're blaming industry for not putting enough money. Okay, true as well. But when you very well pointed out that there's no culture of innovation in our countries, isn't your responsibility to create one? Because in our countries in Latin America, all the kids, all the boys want to be the next Lionel Messi, and all the girls want to be the next Shakira, and nobody wants to be the next Nobel Prize in physics. And isn't it your job as university professors to create role models so that kids want to become the next Nobel Prize in physics?
I just want to tell something about that. We need heroes. Young people want to be the next Messi. So in our culture in Latin America, we must show that young professor, people with the name Jose Rodriguez. Rodriguez is the most common family name in South America. This was my name. And people with that name that are also able to create a company to be successful, to become millionaire. If Latin American people see that, they will say, I want to be like him. And that will play a big influence in the development of our system, the society. We must recognize them. We must award them, to give them award. Because in the past, 10 years ago, if a professor earned money with something in a company, that he didn't receive a good evaluation from their peers. That was a reality. And not to speak about the student. That was completely impossible. Now, we must show that it is possible that a professor and even a student can be millionaire doing a good patent. And if we show that in television, in the web page of the university, that will be a big change.
I would like to say something to this topic. As you might know, in many Latin American countries and the Caribbean, we have industrial hubs, we have centers of innovation, and in many cases, these are very important hubs, not only nationally, but internationally. Just look at the hub you have in Mexico, in Guanajuato, and Puebla, or what we have concerning biomedical items in Costa Rica. We have more than 300 different industrial complexes. And in Costa Rica, we have a research center from Intel. So in many cases, we do have platforms that are very, very important. But many of these hubs act as if they were an enclave. So they do not have enough linkages to the national economy. And it is not because the national economy has not the potential to give significant contributions to these different hubs. It is because it is a national policy, but also an international policy of not having these hubs connected to the national economy. And I also have to say that in many of our universities, we also have the platforms in order to promote entrepreneurship and also innovation. We have offices that are dedicated to the transfer of technology. And we also do indeed transfer knowledge. Our agriculture, for instance, it would be absolutely unimaginable without the transfer we do from the universities to the agriculture. And I want to mention one aspect that I think is very important. And in this field, I can give you an instance of an innovation that is humanly also very important. It has to do with neglected diseases. Well, diseases that are not taken into account by the international pharmaceutical industry. In Latin America and in many of the countries of the southern hemisphere, we have a phenomenon that is very important, and it is snake bites. More than 100,000 persons in the world die yearly as a consequence of being bitten by a snake. And how many industrial entrepreneurs do you have in the world that are making antivenoms? Very, very few. Very few.
You make a big point, but may I ask you and everybody else whether your argument that we're good at social innovations, which we are, but doesn't that breed complacency when others are making tons of money? I mean, isn't that well, you say money is not everything in the world, but you know, the University of California alone registers more than 500 patents a year.
Yes, but I think it's important. It's important, I think, to...
That's more than all of our countries together in many cases.
But it's important to historicize the conversation. Many of the things you describe and the processes which you describe and which we celebrate took place in this country in the 60s and 70s. It was an interesting moment. It was an interesting moment when industry, academia, and government came together to create this culture. I think the circumstances, certainly in the Caribbean, is that our universities became centers where the conversation about social justice, the conversation about inequality, those conversations transcended the conversation over economic growth, and there's no doubt about that. So within the university world, there are several discourses taking place. At the moment in the Caribbean, I would say that the majority of our citizens, yes, are concerned with economic growth. They're concerned about the state of the economy, but they're also concerned about social injustice. They're also concerned about inequality. They're also concerned about the exploitative nature of entrepreneurship. They're also concerned about international policy and strategies, so that the leaders of the universities do not control those discourses. We would love to, but we can't. And I think importantly, the conversation about economic growth and the importance of it is now maybe the top priority, but it wasn't the top priority for 30 years. And if citizens, if students are coming to college and they're saying, but listen, yes, we want the economy to grow 3-4%. Yes, we want unemployment to be less than 5%. But there are so many structural injustices, discrimination against women, racial discrimination, class discrimination. And annually, all of the indices are showing that these discrepancies and inequalities are growing. And so we might have circumstances where an economy grows 4%. What happens when an economy grows 4% and inequality increases? We had a circumstance, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, where the economy grew by 9% per year for 15 years because of petrochemical increases in global oil prices. But at the end of 15 years of economic growth, poverty had increased and inequality had increased. And so citizens became very concerned about this thing we call economic growth and whether it results. So now the conversation is about inclusive growth and it's about social growth. And so for us, social growth is as important as economic growth.
Dr. Julio Frenk, what can universities do to learn from one another and cooperate? I know that you've been proposing a consortium of Latin American and Caribbean universities. What is that about? How can you guys collaborate to improve each university's innovation, research, and development capabilities?
Thank you, Andres, and thank you to everyone for being here. Yes, we've been discussing all morning with the rectors and leaders from presidents, rectors, provosts, and leaders from 10 universities, in addition to our own University of Miami, how to build an idea of a hemispheric university consortium, an idea of a small group of universities that are innovative, that are transforming their own practices in their respective countries, but that can come together both to learn from each other, but also, very important, to identify synergies. And we've had a very productive series of conversations this morning, in addition to the fact that many of us have met each other in different occasions. But the idea of the consortium is to identify a number of problems that are common to the entire hemisphere, and we're working together, we may come with better solutions than each of us working in isolation. One of those has to do with innovation, what we've been discussing here. And let me say, we are calling this hemispheric because Latin America and the Caribbean are very much at the heart, but it also includes the United States. The United States, if we speak of Latin American populations, not countries, has the third largest Latin American population. Only Brazil and Mexico, and it's tied with Colombia as the third largest Latin American population. And it includes Canada, which has played historically a very important role geopolitically with the Caribbean, the English-speaking Caribbean, with Haiti as the countries of the Francophonie, and now with Mexico through NAFTA. So we are talking about the entire hemisphere cooperating across some fundamental common themes. We've identified among those potential themes that we're going to be working with student exchange, with faculty and research, and with innovation, themes like some of the health issues that we've been discussing, including pandemics, climate change and urban resilience, which is a common thread, and then very importantly, the topic that Sir Hilary was just mentioning, how do we develop inclusive innovation? And it's both, and it's been said before, both what do we do with our own faculties, but also how do we teach innovation as innovation and entrepreneurship as a cross-cutting competency that students need to be comfortable with or master, even if they're going to pursue careers in the humanities. The idea of creativity, an innovative mind, and entrepreneurship, I think, is a common competency. So we've had some very interesting discussions. One of our goals is to, I think Miami offers a huge potential. I was speaking about that in a panel this morning, of developing a hemispheric innovation hub, making available to the entire region, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean, all those other elements that Pablo referred to as the ecosystem, that sometimes are weak in some of the countries, like issues about intellectual property protection, access to venture capital, access to the largest market, which is here. Because of Miami's role as location at the crossroads of the Americas, I think it can offer a space where innovators working in all of our universities can find other elements and supplement some of those hubs that are already present, like Rector Jenson was just mentioning. I think that's a unique advantage that Miami can offer. And that's what part of the work of the consortium would focus, in addition to the teaching of innovation and entrepreneurship as a cross-cutting competency for all our students.
Dr. Agopyan?
Vahan, Agopyan, I am the rector of University of São Paulo, Brazil. Andres, I'm not going to justify our faults, but I will try to explain how several Latin American universities are trying to overcome these difficulties. The first point is we realize that it's more important the quality instead of quantity. So our research work we are trying to conduct, we are trying to stimulate to get better results, more deeply developed results than just to produce a large number of papers. So this is a major achievement and a major movement that we are getting in some universities in Latin America. Let's say we have some areas of knowledge in Latin America which are, let's say, among the best in the world. The second point is how to translate these good results into practice, innovation, how to do innovation. And this is another step that, of course, it's very costly, it takes time, but we are learning that the best way to get the innovation is to work with the industry, with the companies from the beginning. When you start your research work, if you have some companies working with you, let's say, joining efforts with you, you can be sure that the translation from the result of the research for the practice will be in very short period of time. So we are trying, several universities are trying to follow these two steps.
Let me finish in just a few words my story concerning antivenoms. As I was saying, 125,000 people die as a consequence of snake bites in the world. That's a lot of people. There is no international big pharmaceutical industry that produces antivenoms. Not one in the industrial world. Antivenoms are produced in South America and Central America, in Butantan, near Sao Paulo, and in Costa Rica. And these antivenoms are not only produced, but distributed all over the world, are at a very low cost, very low. The research that is conducted in order to develop these antivenoms is complex. And it is as complex as any biological or biotechnological research has to be. Okay? That's a very important innovation. It is, I think, very relevant to ask yourself what kind of economic growth you need and wish, and what kind of innovation you have to do. We have competitive innovation, and I think it is very important. It makes money, a lot of money. But you also have inclusive innovation. That kind of innovation that has in mind the well-being of people. I think this difference is very, very important to make. As Mr. Beckles was saying, in our countries we have a lot of issues we have to solve. And one of the, or many of the issues have to do with exclusion, with poverty, with discrimination, and so forth. And universities play really a very important role in trying to solve these kind of questions.
If you're bitten by a snake, I'm sure you'll be very thankful to Costa Rica and to your university for producing this thing. No, and I seriously think that it's important for Latin American and emerging countries to produce these kinds of things they need and that big pharmaceutical companies are not interested in doing. But that doesn't preclude your universities from focusing on creating a Microsoft, a Google, a Intel, and make billions and billions of dollars, which is what promotes economic development and gets people out of poverty. So instead of sitting there and congratulating yourself for the big venom anti-poison you created, shouldn't you be saying, hey, we did this great thing, now we've got to focus on what we are not doing, which is making money?
Yeah. My name is Carlos Zamudio from Universidad Cayetana Heredia in Peru. The first thing is that we need, at the university, recognize that there are some limitations. Of course, there's poor resources. We need funding. Of course, there are other priorities, social priorities, or social activities in our countries. But our role in a university for make this cultural change is to recognize that we can make this change promoting innovation, promoting a culture of patents. And that, at the end, will give us more resources or more earnings to try to face up these social problems. So this is something that we need to recognize, and we need to invest in this. And we are very compromised on giving this. So what we have been done is that we recognize there's less money, there's poor money, but with that poor resources, we have a lot of things to do. We have implemented programs to promote innovation and patent culture in all our postgraduate courses. We have implemented also courses in undergraduate courses, and with collaboration with our local competent authority in Peru, we have developed a web-based course to the community, to the regular people, to look and understand what is innovation, what is patent, what is intellectual property. And of course, and I don't want to be like here we were saying about climate change, and I don't want to say like this is gonna happen, but in the remote case that we have a climate change and snakes start proliferating all over the world, the world will turn around and say, well, we need a vaccine, or we need antivenom, and who's going to take advantage of that? Probably Costa Rica and Brazil, because they are being involved in this for several years. And that's the big thing of not only being working with the industry, and this is the push and the pull. Sometimes the industry is pulling you to promote and to do some research and innovation, but the universities that maintain some fields, they can push something when it's the proper moment. And I just want to finish. I was just to say something that Dr. Julio said. It's important to learn how to teach innovation, how to teach this kind of skills. For example, our university has invested in all of this, trying to work with the government and with all the allies that we have, and we have increased a lot the number of patents that we have. But it's not only the problem of having patents. How many of these patents have been commercialized? Only one. So we need to learn when, why, and how make this innovation and these patents works to us and not be also an expense. And this is part of what we can agree between us to collaborate and learn between each other in our experiences how to promote this in all our countries.
Let's go back for 1 minute to what Dr. Frenk alluded to, which you also just alluded to, which is what can universities do to teach innovation? How can we, you as university presidents, promote innovation in students? How do you teach innovation?
That's very short.
It's like to play tennis. You learn to play tennis playing tennis. And not so many lectures, just activities where people face problem to be innovated or to be entrepreneur, just doing. That's the main thing.
And I think just to build on that, you have to give students the opportunity to interact with experienced entrepreneurs. And to just close off the comments that have been made, if you look around what makes for a successful ecosystem, you need the intellectual property, as was said earlier, coming out of largely research universities, but not always. You need access to capital, and I think many of the countries that becomes a challenge. But the third piece is you need managerial talent, experienced talent. Universities can play a role in it, but I think, as everyone would say, and I agree with your comment, MBA school only gets you so far. You need the experience. And so the ecosystems that have been successful have a pool of talent that have built global companies, and as with the Mobileye example, are ready to give back into their communities, and they make the investments, but they also mentor those new companies coming out of those systems. And so the Silicon Valley example, Boston, those systems developed over 40, 50 years and have built up all those components. And I think many of the places that we're talking about are at the start of doing that sort of activity.
Are you, for instance, I'm asking this to all of you, are you taking advantage of your expats, for instance, in the US and Europe, as Indians do with their expats in Silicon Valley, who go back to India as investors, as entrepreneurs? Are you as universities taking advantage of that?
So we've actually just established an entrepreneurship leadership council where we have our successful alumni, many of whom are from the Valley, but from other parts of the world as well, to give advice to us and then to come in to serve in those roles as mentors, to be available for our companies as they start going.
And Andres, if I can just go back to the teaching question, the University of Miami developed something called the Launchpad. And the Launchpad is focused on students who actually, it's a hands-on experience. It's now been emulated by a number of other universities. I think part of developing the ecosystem is to offer those specific opportunities for students that have ideas to actually develop and work on them. And the Launchpad is exactly that. It's for students and alumni who have an idea, and then you have competent mentors there who help them through the entire process. And then we've been partnering with the Cambridge Innovation Center to create Converge Miami, a space in downtown Miami, which is, and with Wax for Bioscience, to create Converge Miami. And that's a space open. There's now a whole series of labs and maker spaces that are actually available to students and faculty from other universities, not just from the University of Miami. And that again, when we build this Hemispheric University Consortium, that is a resource that we hope to make available to students and inventors from universities from across the Americas. That's part of the vision in building that ecosystem.
I should also add that the question you ask frames the answer you get. One of the challenges that we are faced with in the Caribbean is this. Each year, 60% of our science graduates disappear into the United States. Well, first of all, you know the challenge. The challenge is to have young people turned on to science in the first place. In the Caribbean, we turn these kids on to science. They go to college, they graduate, the bright and the best. 60% immigrate into the US within a year of graduation. So in fact, our universities are producing science graduates for the United States. We have thousands of graduates of my university working in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is therefore a global space, but you present it as an American space. But it really, in fact, is a place where some of the best and brightest people of the world have converged. I think those are questions you also need to ask.
But please go ahead. Just if I may answer it, if I may. Bangalore in India was made out of Indian expats. They went to Silicon Valley, created their own companies. They discovered that they could hire an engineer for $20 instead of for $200 an hour. They went back to Bangalore. They created their industries in Bangalore. And thanks to those expats, India today is what it is. So it works both ways.
And I suggest the answer, therefore, has to do with the role universities can play in assisting their governments to shape an appropriate policy.
Go ahead.
Just to answer the question, what are we doing to teach our students? We built a 9,000 square meters building in the middle of the campus. It's an innovation center. One of the goals is that all the students go through from different activities. All the labs are open. We have many courses about innovation. We have a master degree. We have a major. So it's part of the generation effect that I think the new students, the new faculty are taking this important role in making innovation in the university.
Thank you very much. I wanted to point to the fact that in Costa Rica we also do what every university in the world is doing. We have an office for technology transfer. We also have a business incubator that receives funds from the government. Just 2 weeks ago, we inaugurated something that I think is quite innovative, and it is a lab which we call Proto Lab, which is offered as a service to the community. It is an open space where people from the community can come and conduct experiments. They have to their service computers and, well, everything you have in a lab. And this is done in order to stimulate people from the community to work on new materials in order to search for some solutions or some new products. I think that's quite an innovation to try to involve the community in these innovations processes. But I have to also say something. Not every innovation results in a patent. That's quite a simplification, to think only in terms of patents. There are many, many innovations that have to do with incremental changes, improvements of different items or products.
We have only 3 minutes left. Does anybody want to say something about what universities are doing or should be doing to produce graduates more in tune with the skills that will be needed in the 21st century? Now that robots and algorithms are going to do much of what we do, what do you guys do to produce people who will be able to survive and thrive in an increasingly automated economy? Who wants to take it?
Well, that's another area of innovation in itself, which is to transform the way we impart education so that in addition to being specialists in a particular field, which needs to continue to happen because we have a complex division of labor, students are also equipped with the necessary competencies to face the most dynamic labor market in human history because of the forces you're talking about. The jobs that our graduates are graduating into will change so rapidly that universities need to be open spaces, constantly bringing back students to refresh. And so the idea that education is something that happens to you at a particular age, higher education, has to be changed by an open architecture where people come in and out. And I think we're going to have to develop new ways and through innovations in education to develop cross-cutting competencies like creativity, critical thinking, ability to work in teams, and very importantly, ability to engage in ethical reasoning, because part of what we're going to need in this very rapidly changing labor market is to engage in that kind of ethical deliberation about the consequences of our choices. It's a very exciting time because innovation, both technologically and in terms of how we teach, is really fueling an education revolution right now around the world.
How many of you think that 10 years from now, your universities will be at least 50% physical? In other words, how many of you think that 10 years from now, more than 50% of your activities won't be online? 50%, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I don't see Luis, 9. So 9 of you think that 10 years from now, more than 50% of your university activities will be online.
If you actually came and look at what happens in our classes now, a lot doesn't happen in the classrooms anymore. So our students interact online with their instructors, they watch videos, so we're already transforming. So whether we're in physical space in the future or not, it's going to change as we're changing the way we teach. The innovations are happening.
The University of Costa Rica has now a little more than 40,000 students. And we have in this semester 19,000 students studying online.
Thank you very much. A big round of applause for all of you. Thank you very much. That was very interesting.